Satchidanandarupaya Vishvotpatyadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha. Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditarataschaarteshvabhignaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Sargo Mrsha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Kaitavotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayonmulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamunikrite Kim Va Parerishwaraha Sadyo Hridya Varudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushuvistakshanam. Hari Om and greetings from Pittsburgh. I was interacting with a seeker recently. This seeker is in our Upanishad course, like many of you are. And I'd asked him, what do you think we should study on Tuesday nights in the upcoming year, from September of this year to May of next year? And the exact words he used is, we have a tendency to make the Upanishad academic. And so what we need to do is follow this academic perspective with that which is practical. And so he shared that we should study Bhakti Shastra, the science of devotion. And as he was sharing this, I was listening carefully. He cares, I care. And so that was the message to me from Bhagavan Krishna, that on Tuesdays, moving forward, we will explore Narada Bhakti Sutra. And all of you are welcome to join that class when we commence in September. Thinking about this more, this term about practical. Practicality has varying depths. For the person who is more of a secular bent, then practicality is lowering one's blood pressure. For someone who has more of a sacred bent, practicality is surrendering. Just like water. If you take surface water and drink it, there's a higher chance you're going to get sick than if you take water that's come from the earth 50 feet deep. How beautiful is it that the most practical narrative or bent is that of bhakti? To surrender what we have and what we do and what we are to divinity. And as I've been sharing in the morning, the more one surrenders, the more one rises. This morning, we complete 150 hours of Vedanta and Bhagavata, 150 weeks of the most beautiful practicality. And I know many of you resonate with what I'm sharing in terms of this being practical. For those who do not, analyze your personality more. Do you have this secular bent? Are you treating this subjective science as academic? If that's the case, reflect more. Reflect on what that perspective is bringing to your life and what this perspective can bring to your life. In the 11th skanda, or section, it is Bhagavan Krishna himself who is reviewing Bhagavata. It is not Rishi Vyasa. It is definitely not Vivek. It is Bhagavan Krishna himself who's reviewing Bhagavata because he wants Rishi Uddhava to come with him. He wants us to come with him. If you can try to remember 150 weeks ago, when I was explaining the Bhagavata Mahatmya, one of the narrations I shared was how a Devi named Bhakti had two children whose names were Viveka and Vairagya, and they were much older than her in appearance. She was lively, they were dull. And the point is that through understanding the intricacies of Bhagavata, that Viveka and Vairagya can become robust again. And I feel a lot of our experience is proof of that. We are clearer about what's a priority. We are clearer about independence. In the 11th skanda, we have come across many examples about how Viveka and Vairagya have come to life, like with Pingala, how this prostitute, as if all of a sudden, became a Vairagi. She became independent. She became a teacher, Pingala Gita. Then the Dvija, that Brahmana who didn't study and share freely, and he was abused because that's how he lived. But he too knew what's important, and he shared Bhikshu Gita. What this means for us is, through satsanga, we get the opportunity for kata. Through kata, Viveka and Vairagya will grow again. They will be revived. And this can happen in any condition. Whether for a prostitute, if I very generally create a spectrum, a prostitute would be here and a brahmana would be here. But in both cases, it happened magically. Now, for all of us who feel like, how am I going to evolve? How am I going to prioritize and be independent? Stay in satsang. Keep your ears and your head and your heart open, and magic will happen for Viveka and Vairagya to be stronger in us. In the 23rd chapter, we are given a audio-visual example of someone who depends on articles. In English, we would call such a person addicted. Addicted to television, addicted to their phone, addicted to salt, addicted to whatever. The Sanskrit word for addiction, it is a very apt word, vyasana. Vyasana. Please remember that. To be addicted is someone who's struggling with vyasana. And how do you fight this addiction? Through vyasa. Vyasana means addiction. Vyasa means elaboration. By reflecting on addiction, one comes to realize that this is not helping you or anyone. And that's what that Dvija or Bhikshu did. He reflected on his experiences and he became a teacher. Bhikshu Gita. In chapter 24, Bhagavan Krishna is reviewing the gunas. Gunas means qualities. Gunas also means robes. Like yesterday when I was facilitating the Vivaha, I was wearing this kusha dress. And as soon as the vivaha was over, I took it off because it's hard to wear that when you're typing or you're moving a bag or whatever it is. Even though it's so small and it's a purification guna, but it's still a rope. It's still a limit. And that's why Bhagavan Krishna takes us through Sankhya. He goes deep into how creation has come to be. The implication being is the more you are understanding of creation, the more you know there's more to creation. When we understand the gunas, we know that there's more than limits. That's what Sankhya is, to know well. And the application I had shared with all of you in chapter 24 is to label less. What is a label? It's us assigning a quality. It is us assigning a limit or a rope. Pujaswami Tejomayananda had shared. Results are not the problem. It's our labeling of results that are the problem. There's going to be results. We're acting all the time. But to label, to insist on a certain result, that's what's problematic for us. Try labeling less. I like this phrase that is used in India, that when it's hot, people say it's hot, period. It's cold, period. The point is, don't go on labeling. It's so hot. And, when I was growing up, it wasn't so hot. And now there's the humidity accounted for that and so on. And that's all you think about then. You see how the mind becomes limited. In chapter 25, where do gunas come from? What are they an expression of? Maya. Chapter 24 is on gunas. Chapter 25 on Maya. A synonym for Maya is Daivi. And I like this term, Daivi. Daivi means that which depends on Deva. Here, Deva means consciousness. Because of consciousness there is Maya. And that shows that Maya is not independent. Maya can go. Daivi, that which depends on consciousness. Consciousness is independent. Consciousness can't go. Another term for this is Brahma Ashraya. Maya's Ashraya is Brahma, which means Maya's support is infinity. How many of you would describe yourself as a logical person by a show of hands? Logically, if there's infinity, can there be anything else? So now if I ask you again, are you a logical person? Don't put your hand up. If there's infinity, there can't be Maya. Why take it so seriously? Why label gunas? Why be addicted to articles? All of this is being connected together. Rishi Tulasidasa gives a most practical definition of Maya. Me or mora. Me means I-ness and mora means minus. That's what Maya is. So the more possessive one is, the more you are succumbing to Maya. The more doership one has, the more you are succumbing to Maya. Why this is so practical? Because if this is what the expression of Maya is, this is how I have to go back to be deeper than Maya. Mora, this idea of minus, dissolve it. What is yours? If you can't dissolve possessiveness, one is never going to dissolve being possessed, that I am the doer. And that's why I've been hammering out for 3 years the need to be a generous person, the need to flex your dana muscle. You see how that becomes the trigger for letting go of ahangara. But if one is holding on to the external so strongly, one does not stand a chance to let go of this internal holding on, the ego. A couple of more thoughts. Pujaswami Tejomayananda has shared, Maya is our moods, our moods. So the point is, the more moody you are, the more Mayavadi you are. Moodiness is an example of us succumbing to Maya. Now, what's interesting about a subjective science like Vedanta, let me backtrack a little bit. There's a show that our children watch called Dr. Binocs. You should watch it sometimes too. And it's actually produced in India. And I know this because there's so many episodes about poisonous snakes and poisonous spiders and so on. Because in Canada, what poisonous snakes or spiders do we have? And so I like watching the snake episode. And they share that it is through venom that they develop anti-venom. Where the disease is, the cure can be found. And I think that's how a vaccination works too. They put a little bit of that disease in you, and then your body finds the cure. The disease is the gunas, but the cure is also the gunas, specifically sattva guna. To make one's vision and lifestyle oriented towards quietness. Tamas is laziness, rajas is aggressiveness, sattva is quietness. To nurture this, and eventually what happens is that quietude leads to silencing the ego. How many of you are joining me for our silence retreat next weekend? So many of you. This is the trajectory is to quieten the mind, still the intellect, and finally, silence the ego. This is why we call it a silence retreat. Really, it's a egoless retreat. How much do you have to pay to be part of this retreat? Nothing. What barriers to entry are there to this retreat? Nothing. No conditions, because often when there's externalities like a registration or a fee, expectations come with that. Expectation is an expression of ego. So the whole retreat is designed to be not normal to what we're used to. We continue. I've already shared so much content, I feel, just in 20 minutes. Now I have to keep on sharing more. Chapter 26 is about depending on not articles, but beings. When you depend on articles, that's called addiction. When you depend on beings, it is called attachment. Bhagavan Krishna is sharing this with Rishi Uddhava to help him understand he shouldn't depend on articles or beings, but rather to depend on not ABC, but D. D means divinity. Divinity. And the reason why this is being shared logically is if you don't depend on D, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to be like that Dvija. Now, who's coming? This person is called Aila. And Bhagavan Krishna is subtly implying is that all of this is going to change. Articles are going to change, beings are going to change, but divinity is not. So to change our dependency, that's the flow we're in right now. Bhagavan Krishna begins chapter 26, sharing, as a human, you have an opportunity to be me. Stones, plants, animals, they can't be me, but you can. Now, for all of you to think about this more, you've been with Bhagavan Krishna for at least 150 hours. So you're not just an ordinary human. You have an extraordinary opportunity to be Bhagavan Krishna. And if you are Bhagavan Krishna, then you will not be touched by Maya or the gunas. Bhagavan Krishna's Maya Pati will not be touched. Think of how practical that is. That you can live in Dvaita. You can live with, you can be in the closest relationship with someone who is tamasic and not be affected by that. So everyone who's having family problems, what is the solution? Be Bhagavan Krishna. If one doesn't fulfill this opportunity, obviously, Maya is going to drown one through the gunas. Maya is going to drown one through the gunas. I'm reading to you just the history of, his name is Raja Pururavas. Raja Pururavas. That famous emperor, Pururavas, after he recovered from the terribly distracted state of mind into which he fell on account of separation from Urvashi. I want to pause here. Do you remember who Urvashi is? Hey, tell me, who created Urvashi? Let's see if you really remember. Now you're going to say Brahma. Obviously. Some time ago, close. Wow. I am impressed by the chat right now. Some time ago, it was Indra Sura who was going to tempt Rishi Narayana. Indra Sura was insecure that Rishi Narayana was going to become the next Indra. And so he sent all of these very beautiful beings to tempt him. And Rishi Narayana, see, he is Bhagavan Krishna, so not succumbing to Maya or gunas, he slapped his thigh or snapped. Uru means thigh. And Vashi means the one who's in control of the thigh, meaning someone who's disciplined. And that's who, from that Urvashi came. And Rishi Narayana said, here, you take Urvashi back to Indra Asura and see if he can succumb to her. So that's who Urvashi is, for your reference. Became possessed of an intense spirit of dispassion and expressed his feeling in a poem. He was deeply attached to Urvashi, but somehow Viveka and Vairagya grew. Seeing Urvashi deserting him, the king ran after her naked, like a madman, moaning in utter distraction. I love this ancient English. Oh, hard-hearted lady. That's your raw this week. You have to you have to use that phrase, oh hard-hearted lady, every day. Stop. Do not go away. His mean sexual passions still unsatiated and his whole mind still absorbed in Urvashi, he was unaware of the long time he had spent in her company and of the years that were ahead. So shared simply, he depended on a being, and what happened to him? He became possessed. The king running naked after someone who does not depend on him. This is the chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. It's giving this setup. Now from verses 7 to 24. This is known as Aila Gita. Bhikshu Gita we've completed. This is Aila Gita. I'm going to read a little bit in English, and then I'll share 2 verses with all of you. How surprising is the intensity of that sexual passion that swayed my soul all this while. He is reflected. He's sharing his reflections with himself. He's not even speaking to anyone. This is like me asking you, read, then write, correct? You write on paper what you're thinking about, what you're questioning, and so on. A considerable period of my life, consisting of several days and nights I've spent in the embrace of Urvashi, unconscious of the lapse of time. My heart stolen by her, I knew not when the sun rose or set, nor was I aware that countless years had passed in this way. Looking at the enormity of my delusive ignorance, I, the crest jewel of the community of ruling princes, nay, an emperor, had been reduced to a mere pet animal. When one is possessed, anyone can possess them then. Makes sense? Okay. This is how Aila Gita begins. It's from verses 7 to 24. I'm reading verse 15 in Sanskrit. I'll share more insights. Pumschalya parhatam chittam Punvanyo mochitum prabhuhu Atma Rameshwaram rete Bhagavantam adhokshajam. Time is tight, so I'm just going to read the translation rather than go word by word. Again, this is verse 15. Who but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who lies beyond material perception and is the Lord of self-satisfied sages, can possibly save my consciousness, which has been stolen by a prostitute? Sharing this in a simpler way. Aila, or Raja, Pururavas, is thinking to himself that his mind has been stolen by attachment. Who can help him other than the divine? Other than Manmohan. Then we call Manmohan, Manohara, the one who can steal the mind back. Here's some reflections. This Raja shares, to have pride about one's outer world, yet to be attached or insecure in one's inner world is really to be a fool. To be so strong outwardly, but so weak inwardly is a sign of a foolish investment. Correct. I'd shared in a different way. When one doesn't shift their investment from IQ to EQ to SQ, it's like having a rich body and a poor mind. We don't live at the body level, we live at the mind level. Even if you think of immunity, the more cheerful you are, the more your body recovers. They should create a medicine to help people be cheerful. They should brand it as Vibha. Doesn't that sound like a good medicine, Vibha? Another reflection is, this is all coming from Aila Gita. He reflects that Kama grows with Kama. Suppose one is lusty and they think, if I experience what I'm lusting towards, then that lust will go away. What actually happens? That lust expands then, and he gives the example like ghee. If I think I'm going to put a fire out with ghee, what happens to that fire? It expands. I had shared this in the Vivaha yesterday, that back in the day, Vivahas were facilitated outside, and it was awesome. So much wood, so much samagri, so much ghee. Now we have to do things in hotels where there's smoke alarms and heat alarms. So everything has to be so small and maintained. And that's not fun for a pujari. I want to have a big fire. And this section in Aila Gita is completed here. And then he continued with Aila Gita. I really love this reflection. He shares, there is no one to blame for this attachment but me. He does not blame Urvashi for being so beautiful. It's her fault that she's so good looking. And he gives the example of, if someone mistakes a rope for a snake, only the person who made that mistake could be blamed, correct? You can't blame the rope. One more verse. I'm now shifting to verse 28. Teshu nityam mahabhaga, mahabhageshu matkataha, sambhavanti hitanirnam, jushatam prapunantyagam. Here's the translation. O greatly fortunate Uddhava, in the association of such saintly devotees, there is a constant discussion of me. And those partaking in this chanting and hearing of my glories are certainly purified of all sins. So sharing again with all of you, he has this reflection that his mind has been captured. How can he retake his mind? This verse I just read to you is Bhagavan Krishna, who's speaking to Rishi Uddhava, and he shares, it is by listening to those who are independent, by listening to those who have their mind, that you can retake your mind. Some more reflections, and then we'll end this chapter. Pujaswami Tejomayananda had shared about this Aila Gita. When we are busy labeling, buying name brand clothes, hanging out with name brand people, whatever sense of labeling that we engage in, it makes us extrovert, right? A label is outside. It's an awesome hotel, or it's an awful hotel. It's making me think of the hotel. It makes one extrovert. And if one is extrovert, then one cannot inquire. You cannot inquire then. If you see this visually, here's gunas, here's Maya, here's Brahma, infinity. if I'm busy labeling, I'm even farther in terms of the gunas, correct? Then how am I going to come to infinity? This Raja shares, who does this body belong to? Listen to this change. He's not inquiring into her body anymore. He's inquiring into his body. And he says, who does this body belong to? And he lists out, does it belong to one's parents? Because they biologically created the body. So is this body my parent? Does this body belong to one's spouse? If don't just think of spouse, think of family. One is with their family most of the time. Does this body belong to one's employer? Because one's employer says, body, do this, body, do that. If you don't do this body, then I'm not going to pay your body. Does this body belong to one's friends? One's friends have so much expectations of us. Does this body belong to vultures? If I die in the grass over there, maybe before a person comes to me, a vulture will come to me. And finally shares, does this body belong to fire? Because the last entity that's going to touch this body is fire. The more body conscious you are, the more tuned in you become to other people's bodies. If I put in so much effort to be good looking, I'm going to keep looking at people who are good looking too. See how I'm practicing what I'm preaching by not investing in being good looking. I just stopped cutting stuff now too. And he finishes this line of thought by sharing, what is the difference between me and worms? Worms love bodies and I love bodies. So what is the difference between me and worms? Strong teachings, yes. But most practical also, yes. Today at breakfast, I was sitting beside a psychiatrist for myself, and I happened to be sitting beside her. And she was telling me that she engages in, I think it's called palliative psychiatry, so helping people die. And I shared, I do the same thing. I'm teaching Bhagavata. It teaches the art of dying. And the point that I'm trying to make is that it requires so much investment to accept that you're going to die. We intellectually know this, but we don't actually practice this, correct? So this is so practical what we're doing. The final thought to be shared from this Aila Gita. Raja Pururavas shares a way to be less attached to beings. He says, out of sight, out of mind. Don't keep what you're attached to in sight so much. And what happens, eventually the mind forgets about it. So it gets out of your mind. Like, you know, in our culture, the person who's teaching Vedanta, where they sit, tell me in the chat, what is that called? A person who's sharing Advaita Vedanta, where they sit, what is that philosophically called? It's called the Vyasa Pita. If we just focus on Pita, it is not a seat, it really is an altar. And in this altar, what is invoked? What is invoked? Vyasa. Vyasa, I told you, means elaboration. And what happens when you're so interested in this elaboration? What do we slowly forget about? Vyasana. Our addictions, our attachment. When you watch a great movie, do you feel hungry? When you're experiencing a great sunset, are you thinking about a certain being? It is through satsanga that we experience kata. Through kata, we come to change what our mind is holding on to. Out of sight, out of mind. I'm going to read a few paragraphs in English, and then we will end today's class. This is Bhagavan Krishna speaking to Rishi Uddhava. He's describing what it means to be in satsang, the power of satsang, on how it changes what our mind holds on to. Expressing such thoughts as these in a song, Pururavas, who was worthy of respect among men and celestials, he left the realm of Urvashi. He realized me, the Supreme Spirit, as indwelling in himself, shed all delusions through enlightenment, and attained to peace. Remember how we began? This Raja is running naked after Urvashi. Through grace, he starts to reflect. That's all of his revelations. Now he comes back, and the attachment he had for B, now he has that attachment for D, that is divinity, yes? The holy ones are persons who depend on none except me, who always think of me, who are tranquil, same-sided, and egoless, who are above the pairs of opposites or contrary conditions of life, and who do not care to receive gifts or to accumulate riches. I was telling our Chinmaya Mission Cleveland kids that in Sumaji's Vivaha yesterday, and it's unique to those in Andhra, I believe it's pronounced Jilakara Bellam. Jilakara Bellam. All of our Andhra speakers, did that sound okay? Here I am, a Canadian, facilitating a Vedic Vivaha and speaking in Telugu. So what happens is you have this concoction of jaggery and cumin, and then the bride and groom put it on each other's heads. I wish I could have done that to the bride and groom, but they're supposed to do it to each other. So the jaggery is a representative of sweetness, and the cumin of bitterness, to keep that on the top of your head, that this is how life is. And you have to be balanced in all of that. That is a sign of a holy person, is one who is above the pairs of opposites. Bhagavan Krishna further on shares, just as one who approaches fire gets rid of cold, darkness, and fear, so does the company of holy people help one to overcome the chillness of ritualism, the darkness of ignorance, and the fear of samsara. So who is a holy person? One who's not living in a ritualistic way, but rather one who's living in a meaningful way. Do you all know people who live in a meaningful way? Of course you do. It may be you. So don't think of holy people are old Indian men. And I know there's old Indian men in this class, and you know I mean that respectfully. I'm trying to share that Bhagavata is pura api nava. It's applicable. Holy humans with knowledge of Brahman and established in tranquility are the sole support of humans struggling in the ocean of samsara, just as a strong boat is for people shipwrecked on the sea. We devastatingly keep reading and hearing about people who are trying to move from Africa to Europe, and they're drowning on their way to Greece or Italy and different places. But those who don't drown, they possibly have better vessels. Yes, their boats are stronger. Now, the same goes with us living. If I'm struggling with dejection and anxiety and stress, another person who's struggling with that can't help me. I'd shared with all of you, many years ago, I had saved someone from drowning, and it was awful. This person was, I don't know how to show you, like blue, like this piece of paper here, like a brown skinned person like me, whose skin had turned blue. And as I was lifting him out of the water, he was trying to pull me in the water, naturally so, right? He is looking for breath. He doesn't care who's helping him. So now that's what's happening with us, is that I have so much anxiety and I'm holding on to you, and you have anxiety and you're holding on to me, and we both become heavier then. So the need for a holy person. Last verse. The saints give you, please listen to this carefully, okay? Especially in reference to chapter 11 of Bhagavad Gita. The saints give you the spiritual eyes to realize the Lord in his transcendence and in his immanence, far away and close by. But the sun high up in the sky can give only one kind of sight, that which perceives the externals only. Our parents gave us physical eyes with which we can see Zoom meeting, view, participants, the chat. But it is our trust triangle. It is our guide who gives us the eyes to see, not outside, but Anta. Veda, Anta. Yeah. And that's why in our Pancharinas, more important than our Pitrarina is our Rishirina. When I had spoken at Sheridan College on Tuesday to a group of international students, then I was surprised that they found me on LinkedIn and they were documenting what I had shared, and some of them have started to follow me on LinkedIn. And what I told them was the Pancharinas. I said, you're all born with debts. As you go about becoming a business student, having a career in entrepreneurship, pay those debts back. I even use the Sanskrit word Pancharina. I'm Besharam. I have no shame in talking and speaking about Sanatana Dharma. So for us also, Bhagavan Krishna wants us to come with him. So hold on to him. No need to be dependent on A's and B's. They're going to go away. Depend on D. Oh.